Here I am by myself.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. I thought I was going to be by myself right off the bat.
No, just a click, a delayed click, let's call it.
We love a little bit of a delay to make sure we get things properly and right. So
There
it's always
you
good to
go.
have that pause. That'll be something we talk about, on this show down the
Mhm.
road about interviewing people and how you pause to get more information. But that'll be another episode. But before we get into tonight, we always like to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. Again, the little disclaimer I like to do is I want to get you guys all the information uninterrupted so you could learn about profiling, something that I learned a while ago and got to the point where you try and perfect it, but it's hard. You're going off your life experiences and what you know and what you learned and what you've applied. So everybody's different, but I think after this long time still doing this, and helping people out. Even though I don't do it anymore, I still get calls. Actually, I'm working with a friend of yours, Gwen, to help her profile her the killer she's writing about for her book. So it's a real life person. So we're looking at letters and interviews she's had with them to try and get more of the story so the character comes to life more of the
Nice.
reality of it. So that's pretty exciting. That's going to be coming up hopefully pretty soon. But you always get called for those cases and stuff like that. But I love talking about it. But I love talking about it where the pressure isn't on. So that's always the important part. Hi, Christine. So, again, anybody that's tuning in, again, if I don't get to you, I know you're watching.
Yep.
And I will, of course, at the end of the show, try and get in there, at least within the next 12 hours or so to make sure that I comment and say hi to you. So, but first off, the other night we were on,
Yes.
we announced our horror guest for the Connecticut Paracon coming up on July 11th. Again, www.paracon2ns.org. We got everything this year. We got paranormal, we got horror, and of course, me being there, you got true crime. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think Gwen's going to be there with us, and we'll have a good time. And make sure you guys come out. If you go on the website, you can get tickets, get your hotel stay. Everything's all in one place. The hotel and the Paracon is all in the same place, which makes it nice.
He is, but I don't know if Christine, there is another horror guest that's a big announcement. I'm going to let you say it, Tom.
Yeah, well, yep. James Stokes will be there, but also Ari Lehman is going to be there, the very first Jason. So the theme this year is the first in the latest Jason. So we got, we got the pillars, we got the bookends and all that going to be for the Friday the 13th theme, which will be great.
Yep.
And we got a lot of things, cryptozoologists. So we got a little of everything, alien people. And a lot of books are going to be coming out. A lot of people are going to be bringing their brand new books to Connecticut Paracon for the first time. So we're excited about that. So make sure you come. Some new merchandise over the last couple of years. So that's going to be fun. So those will be announced too. And the other cool part about Connecticut Paracon, our night event, we have, there's going to be a place right nearby. It's just a little bit of a jaunt over. It's a nice big place. They serve food there and all that. And Dystopica, our band that's got a huge following in New England, they're coming in. They'll be opening up for Ari Lehman's band called First Jason. Ari Lehman's band has been playing all over the country, and they're going to be gracing us there in Connecticut and playing. So that's going to be exciting.
They're going to be pretty close to the event location, right? I mean, like where we can carpool and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's not ain't that far. I think it's maybe a mile from the hotel.
Okay.
So yeah.
Not bad at all.
So yeah, it won't be too far for everybody and all that. No, we always got some other stuff up our sleeve too. We always want everybody to have a grand old time, have fun, be wowed, and get to see some cool guests. So, but besides all that, Wardruna, my healing group, with Stacia and all that, we're going to be all over the place talking and all that. And a lot of stuff we do with Wardruna is what I'll be talking about tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Mask of Evil. That's the pathway of the serial mind. So we're really going to be digging deep in what people are are going through and what they're diagnosed with. Most serial killers, what their diagnoses are, and what kind of leads them to do what they do. So we'll be talking about that tonight. But also, I'm still in Florida, still on vacation and all that, and I'm glad that we could bring this to you guys. So I'm in an area where I do have Wi-Fi and stuff like that, which is exciting.
That's good.
But yeah, in the next couple days, we'll be headed up back up to South Carolina to see Gwen and the gang.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have some fun at a haunted hotel, and maybe we'll be going live and all that.
That
and
is
you guys
the
can see
plan.
some fun.
That is
That's the plan.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And
We'll
for
see
you
how the
guys that
signals
don't know, Tom said just a few minutes ago, once he gets really started with the show, he's gonna. I'm not gonna put all the comments. Everybody, we appreciate the highs and all, and you could got to chat. But if you have a question, please try to put it in caps for me or something to make it noticeable. And at the end, Thomas is gonna do that. But during it, I don't want to interrupt him because it's distracting to pop it up. I know it is once we get started.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we'll answer all the questions and all that. And again, anybody that says hi, of course, I'll heart it later on once I go back and read all the notes. But I love everybody that watches. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it keeps you all protected. How you guys doing? All right. So without further ado, Gwen, let's zoom in and uncover the criminal mind. So, all right, guys, we're going to get to the nitty gritty tonight. I know the first 2 episodes, again, if you missed them, go back and watch them on YouTube or go back into Facebook. I know you have to go further back in Facebook to find them, but YouTube, it's a little easier to find, especially when you subscribe to All Access Network Television. But we're going to get into the profiling part, just the mind of the serial killer, what they could be diagnosed with, especially after they've been captured. We're able to question them, question their childhood and those types of things, and take a look at their behaviors and all that. But research in forensic psychology and behavioral analysis, we've identified several reoccurring psychological issues and clinical diagnosis among serial killers. Why no single profile fits every offender. Remember that. Just because there's other people that have these psychological issues, they don't become serial killers or anything like that. Again, they have this stuff. It's always a catalyst that gets them to go there. That's what we're still trying to figure out. So the following disorders and traits are the most frequently studied. So first off, we're going to go into, of course, personality disorders. These are the common diagnoses as they involve enduring patterns of behavior and deviate from social norms. I know I'm talking, like you're in school and all that, but this is stuff we're going to learn. We're going to have fun with it. But first off, probably one of the most prevalent ones is we're going to have abbreviations too, but let me get the long term out, and I might abbreviate the rest of the show, but just as long as you know, antisocial personality disorder, or we call it ASPD. All right, so it's characterized by a pervasive pattern of disregard for the rights of others, deceitfulness, impulsiveness, and a lack of remorse. Just simply, we're going to go into it even further. Another one you'll hear a lot, borderline personality disorder, or BPD. It's less common than ASPD, because I told you before, antisocial personality disorder, but studied in reactive killers. So they're more reactive. It involves extreme emotional instability, fear of abandonment, which I know is really prevalent with Jeffrey Dahmer, and impulsive aggression. So that's a big one. But another one we hear a lot, this term gets thrown around a lot, especially with relationships with certain people, relationships with business people and all that. Narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. It often manifests as an extreme need for admiration, a sense of entitlement, and a total lack of empathy for victims who are viewed as objects. So that's a big thing. But really the biggest part of it, where we really lean towards, is when you see a lot of movies or a lot of TV shows, or just we throw out the term psychopath or sociopath. Those aren't actually diagnoses. Those are just really a split down with ASPD, your antisocial personality disorder. Those are the terms. They're often used interchangeably in casual conversations, but in clinical psychology, neither, again, is an official diagnosis. Remember that. So we just throw it around like, the terms of, just like words on the street or anything like that. But instead, they both fall under the umbrella of the antisocial personality disorder, SPD. So they share a core lack of empathy. So both kind of lack that empathy, disregard for social norms, their origins, behaviors, and styles of interaction differ significantly. So let's break that down. Psychopath versus sociopath. So, and we're going to give you some key people, serial killers from the past that fit that criteria directly or indirectly. But first, we're going to look at sociopath, which is actually considered a secondary type of psychopathy. And then psychopath, which is the primary source of psychopathy when we're dealing with this. So likely environment for the sociopath, their environment tends to be trauma or abuse. That's things that happen to us in youth that change or rewire that frame of mind to become this type. Now, a psychopath, likely the innate, it's a genetic, neurological, brain disorder, or what we like to call the bad seed, just born that way. So that nature versus nurture kind of in that aspect of it. Their temperament, a sociopath tends to be volatile, prone to emotional outbursts, where the psychopath is a little more controlled, cold, and calculating. Tends to be most of our politicians, I guess, but who's to say? And social ability, a sociopath tends to struggle to fit in and often is an outsider. The psychopath, very highly charming, mimics emotion well, and we'll get into that too. But consciousness, a sociopath may have a weak, inconsistent sense of right or wrong. Psychopath lacks a conscious entirely. Jesus, like nothing at all. I can't imagine what goes on in their brain with that total lack right there. But planning, a sociopath tends to be impulsive. Crimes, actions are often disorganized, which we talked about last week, organized, disorganized. And then a psychopath is methodical. They're going to plan ahead to minimize risk. So they still know there's a right and a wrong that they have to hide from, but it's very self-serving. They're only trying to minimize the risk to keep themselves safe so they could keep doing what they do. Let's break that down even more, all right? The psychopath, the cold personality. So psychopathy is generally considered a more severe innate form of ASPD. Research suggests that psychopaths have different brain structures, all right? This is where we're going to get into, particularly in the areas responsible for impulse control, emotional control, and decision-making, like the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, which is all in that limbic system of the brain. So trying to make decisions, impulses, and all that. A lot of times they think psychopaths, young kids that get head injuries. Not all of them that get head injuries are going to end up being psychopaths, but there is still some studies still getting done on that. And again, that psychopath part of it, the bad seed, just born that way. Nobody could figure out why. There's no brain trauma, anything like that. Who knows? An ancestor from the past is latched on. Who knows? But the mask of sanity, psychopaths are often highly intelligent and charismatic, which again, like I talked about, to become president of the United States or politics, the charisma, being a lawyer, where a lot of that comes from. And just so you know, the studies, when they really look at this stuff, I'm going to throw something out there. Connecticut actually has the most people deemed psychopaths in the country, and Maine has the least amount, which is a weird statistic and all that. And, I'm glad I left Connecticut, I guess. There's a lot of psychopaths there, I guess. All my friends that are still there, I'm watching you. And those in Maine, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, especially, my buddy Adam there. So I guess I know you're further away from that, considering you're in the least likely state to have that happen. But, you know, the psychopaths take calculated risk. They're rarely agitated. So that coldness and all, when they cause harm, it's usually a means to an end. They are often successful in professional environments because they can make hard decisions without emotional interference. Those are the guys that'll fire you and not even care that you have a family and all that. So that's the hard part about business side of it. But the total lack of attachment, they do not form genuine emotional attachments to others, although they may have a long-term partnerships that serve as a functional purpose. That's a big one because we look back at some of the serial killers that actually had families or things like that, or function in a job and have relationships and all that. And really deep down, they really don't care. It's a purpose. It's almost like they're hiding, like I said before, you know, to cover their tracks by using these things, these facades for their life and all that. And probably historically, probably the biggest psychopaths that fit in the antisocial disorder there, Ted Bundy, of course, is one of them. As we look at Bundy and his history, and we talk about masking emotions and trying to learn those emotions. If we go back, Ted Bundy had a job at a suicide hotline where we think he really did that to see people at their most low and emotional and try and learn those emotions that would help him do what he did. It planned out. And that's the crazy part of his psychopathy and all. But another one, John Wayne Gacy, he was another one. He had this business. He was involved in politics, well-liked, had his picture taken with presidents' wives. So always getting people to come in with that personality to bring people in and all that. And that's another one. And probably one of the coldest figures that people really look at coldness, because when they watched his court case, just how he talked about his murders were just nonchalant. That would be Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. So those guys all fall into that category directly, indirectly, for the being a psychopath. The next we're going to go back in is sociopath. That's the hot personality. That's the one that are all over the place and all that, you know, again, disorganized. Sociopath is frequently viewed as a result of environmental factors such as chaotic upbringing or childhood trauma. Their behavior is more reactive than proactive, so they're emotionally volatile. So unlike the cool-headed psychopaths, sociopaths are often nervous and easily agitated. They are prone to fits of rage and short fuses, those quick catalysts and all that, a little more off the chain, especially when they're trying to keep stuff, attempting to keep it organized, but they really have that chaos. Now, difficulty with integration, they find it harder to maintain a steady job or a normal family life. Their lack of emotional control makes them appear clearly disturbed or erratic to others. So they have limited empathy. While they disregard general social rules, a sociopath may feel a sense of loyalty or guilt regarding a very small specific circle or people like family member or a close friend. So it's hard to have those relationships. So they might have a little bit here and there, but nothing fully. So historically, we have to look at it as, you know, one of the ones we know, Eileen Wuornos, was very erratic and, you know, prone to fits of anger, especially if you see in her interviews, she could go from, you know, the nicest person to just totally out of control. Same thing, you know, with Richard Ramirez. He was another one, the Night Stalker there, that he had that in and out, that disorganized, and how he was captured by a group of people, just putting himself out in that situation. And again, like I said, Jeffrey Dahmer, he was like probably one of the biggest ones of the sociopath and all that, directly or indirectly again. But yeah, you really put it all together. You got psychopath versus sociopath, and it's really hard to discern all those. So you really have to dig deep, which leads us into like the clinical side of things. Now, how do they determine, you know, what's going on with these people after they've been captured? Probably one of the biggest things, anybody that's out there in the field of psychology or taking a look at these mental disorders, are probably familiar. The DSM-5 or DSM-5, that's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. That's where the 5 comes from. I don't know why they threw it in there, but it's kind of funny. So this is used by all the mental health professionals, an authoritative guide used by clinicians and researchers to diagnose, classify, and identify mental health conditions. Both psychopath and sociopath behaviors are diagnosed as, of course, antisocial personality disorder. To be diagnosed, an individual must show a pervasive pattern of. So this is when they're looking at that, and we're going to dive even deeper. So we're kind of funneling in on a lot of these different antisocial disorder behaviors. But one, failure to conform to social norms or laws, like we said, deceitfulness, lying, using aliases, conning others, which of course you see a lot when a lot of these people are being interviewed. They lie, they want to rise above or anything, or have that boasting and bragging. So that's a big thing. They're impulsive, or their failure to plan ahead. Irritability and aggressiveness, frequently physical fights, getting in fights all the time for whatever outrage that they have at that moment. Regardless disregard for safety and self and others, consistent irresponsibility, work or financial. Those are things to look at too, especially in partners, people that you meet. God forbid you start dating somebody like this. Those are the things that really will jump out, how they spend their money. If they keep going in and out of work and all that, and, changing around, jumping around, just impulsive. Their lack of remorse. So being indifferent to have hurt or mistreated others. Sometimes it's like you see somebody fall and, the best, let's describe it this way. This is how you kind of know. I'm going to tell a little story here. Now, you have your sociopath, psychopath, and all that, and they're thinking about, I want a hamburger. I think I'm going to walk down to McDonald's. I'm going to go get a hamburger. As they're walking down the street, there's a car accident, and laying there is a mother and her child, and it looks like, they're slowly dying, and there's a crowd around, and this sociopath, psychopath walks up and sees all these people, gathered around this person dying and all that. And they look, and then all of a sudden they think about, well, I got to go get my hamburger. So there's no thought of that. That empathy is not there. They're only worried about their hamburger. And that's kind of a good way to describe how their mind is working. So it's just a total disregard of what's going on around them, and no empathy to, somebody's life going away. But, why this distinction really matters, for profile or behavioral profiling perspective, the distinction is vital for predicting behavior. A psychopath is a long game player who has they're hard to catch because they leave little chance. So those are the harder ones to catch. You're just waiting for that one mistake. Somebody just kind of walks in on something is usually what happens. A sociopath is more of a short game player. Their crimes or social transgressions are often messy, impulsive, and leave a trail of evidence. A lot of the sociopaths, they commit a lot of crimes growing up and all that, and they keep this pattern of always getting caught certain crimes, but those crimes grow more and more and more, worse and worse as they get away with them. They get out, they expound on them to that point of murder or sexual assault or anything like that. So those are things to watch when people are, coming in and out of prison or getting arrested a lot. That's usually based more on the sociopaths. Psychopaths tend to stay away from that. Again, they're harder to catch. They're more calculating. They're more screwing you in business than anything else. And that's the big thing to keep an eye on. But the psychopathy construct, so again, we're going to get into something where it's measured. And those are the big things I'm going to tell you about, because this is crazy. When I saw the statistics years ago, it's just, you think something be perfect and 100%. Of course, in humans, it never is, but sometimes it's pretty close. But we often use interchangeable with antisocial disorders here. The psychopathy is a specific clinical construct measured by the PCL-R. Or PCLR, psychopathy checklist revised. It's the Hare Psychopathy Checklist. Dr. Robert Hare came up with this, a 20-item diagnostic tool. It's used to assess psychopathic personality disorders in clinical and forensic settings. So we use, as profilers, use this a lot to really distinguish what we're dealing with, especially at a crime scene, and how things are coming out and what was left and what potentially could be there. So it's a measured effect of emotional and a behavioral traits through interviews and file reviews with total scores of 30 or higher, meaning that they're psychopaths or could be diagnosed that way. The highest score that you could get is a 40. 40 being the highest, like I said, perfection of being a psychopath. Ted Bundy, when they interviewed him, tested a 39 out of 40, which is basically a psychopath. It's insane. So I think he's had one of the highest, he had the highest score. Of course, the next highest score would be perfect unless somebody else got a 39 I don't know about. So it's a commonly indicating psychopathy. But used a lot for risk assessments. They use it a lot because when I worked in the prison, it's used for risk assessments in prison, where we're going to place somebody in the prison system depending on their security level. Also high security hospitals, and of course legal proceedings. They have to evaluate their potential for violence, especially if they're able to be released from prison. We have to worry about recidivism, which is kind of that, are they going to stay out? Are they going to come back? That repeat offenders issue that could come up. So this the PCLR is always a good way to take a look at that. Some of the key traits that are in that 20-item diagnostic, we look at their interpersonal or affective. So when you're interviewing, we have to look at their glibness, their superficial charm, how you question these people, and how you have to circle around and re-question again. If anybody's ever taken a psychology or psychological test, especially when you get into law enforcement, it's a long 300 question. You bubble in what you think. Do you agree, disagree, or anything? It just takes you through the whole gamut. And as you're circling things in, they'll ask the same question again in a different way. It just wants to see what your consistency is. But sometimes, with these guys, the lack of consistency, or you really get to the nitty gritty as you circle around these questions and how they answer. So you got their pathological lying, this callous, unemotional traits that you could witness, emotional detachment, being very manipulative. That's a big one, especially in the prison system. They got 24/7 to try and get one over on you. So that's all they want to do with the game for them, in manipulating to the point where you're interviewing a lot of these serial killers. You really got to think about it. As they were learning at the beginning in the 70s, as they started questioning people with the BSU and going through all that, being manipulative and liars and all that, until you really got into the nitty gritty of it, a lot of the information they were going was based off of being manipulated or the lying and all that. So really a lot of the information they were getting, how credible was it really at the time? So that's still a big struggle and questioning these people. And we're going to get into a whole episode of how we question potential serial killers or killers and what to look out for, especially when they're sitting there and you're one-on-one with them. So they have that lack of remorse, grandiosity. They want to be bigger than life. So a lot of the serial killers, like that part, will lie about how many people they actually killed, because they're almost like they're in competition with other serial killers. I killed more than them. So it's that weirdness that they have. But social deviance, lifestyle, need for stimulation, and parasitic lifestyle, poor behavioral controls, measure of impulsiveness. Again, we talked about juvenile delinquency, coming in and out of prison, and unstable behavior, which is big. Now that's kind of it in a nutshell there, but then we're going to get into something, the psychotic disorders. So this is the ones where most serial killers are legally sane and in touch with reality, but a subset is often termed, we talked about last week, visionary killers. Those are the ones that think God's telling them to do something. Voices are talking to them. So that's the visionary killers. They suffer from maybe the schizophrenia, which of course you got your delusions or auditory visual hallucinations that command the individual to kill. There is treatments for those. A lot of the antisocial, really, I think that's not really treatable to an extent. Schizophrenia is, it could lessen it, but that's what you kind of run into. But brief psychotic breaks, the temporary loss of contact with reality, often triggered by extreme stress, where people actually disassociate with reality. Case in point, there was the situation with Arnie Johnson in Connecticut, where he disassociated and ended up killing his landlord. And of course, that the whole movie, The Devil Made Me Do It. So there's that balance there. Is like, okay, what did he hear? Did he disassociate because of the stress of the fight they were having, is protecting his loved one or anything like that? That's what we look at. But again, that made precedent in that case. And that's another thing to look at, what I always looked at on that case. And other ones, people could look into that a little bit more and just see how what I just said, how that might associate with it. One of the other ones that a lot of people don't talk about, like a little bit of both, like that bipolar or schizophrenia, we call it that schizoaffective disorder, which is another one that's kind of not looked at a lot in serial killers, but there is the potential there. And I just wanted to talk about that one and put it in there. But that's the mental health condition that is marked by a mix of schizophrenia symptoms, such as hallucinations and delusions, and mood disorder symptoms such as depression, mania, and a milder form of mania called hypomania. Hallucinations involve seeing things or hearing voices that others don't observe. Delusions involve believing things that are not real or not true. So that's one of those. And the two types of the schizoaffective disorder, both of which include some symptoms of schizophrenia, again, like I talked about, are the bipolar type, which includes bouts of hypomania or mania, and sometimes major depression, that depression they can't even get off the couch, those types of things. The depressive type, which includes only major depressive bouts. So that's the schizoaffective disorder. It may affect people differently, so that's what we have to really look at. Again, some of these combine with some of the other ones I talked about, but the schizoaffective disorder changes how people think, feel, and act. So again, a dissociation could happen in that aspect of it, doing things we don't know what we're doing. When it isn't treated, the condition can make it hard to function at work or school, kind of taking on, that sociopath if it's not treated. So you got those combos. Or social setting, it also can cause loneliness. People with schizoaffective disorder may need help and support to live their daily lives. Treatment can help manage symptoms and make quality of life better. Again, treatable situations. So now we're going to get into a little bit more. We're narrowing it down a little bit more. Paraphilic disorders. Many serial homicides involve a sexual component. That's kind of how the BSU started, with the sexual assaults with murder before they coined the serial killer phrase, and moving more into that. So the leading study of it, you have the sexual sadism disorder. They're deriving sexual arousal from the physical or psychological suffering of another person. So that's a lot out there. Again, if people have that, they may not be serial killers. Some people have that interest in it for some reason. So that's where you got your dominatrix and all those types of people. And sometimes, like with anything, sometimes a little good could turn bad in some situations and all that, where some people smoke a little bit of weed, they get into harder drugs. So it's just from one thing to the other, where they're making more impulsive decisions. Again, we talked about how some of these people don't make the right decisions and things get out of control and they go into that fantasy world, and then all of a sudden they disassociate and they're permanently in that fantasy world. So, the fetish disorders, it's the obsession with specific non-living objects or non-genital body parts, which often dictates the signature of a crime. So they're like pinned in on one maybe particular body part, or just something in general that they have to use to be sexually aroused or anything with that fetish of pinpointing in and fantasizing about that one type of object. So that, corresponds in, especially with somebody like Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, with his sadism and how he killed his fetish of certain things. So he really falls into that, the paraphilic type of disorder, along with his being a psychopath and antisocial disorder behavior. So how we're starting to break down as we look at some of those famous serial killers and all that, and as we talk about today in the last few episodes, where you could start looking at some of the serial killers about what you talk about and really breaking down maybe how their mind's working and what type of killer they might be by reading their history. Hopefully we could get you up to that point. Now, the next is like traumas and neurodevelopment factors. So that's like a big one. This is where we're really going to get into childhood and what happens to us in childhood, things that teachers could look out for in their students, just are, parents in general, of what kids might, be going through some emotional abuse from other family members or bullies at school or those types of things, how their attitudes change and how their emotions could change and all that. Things we have to look out for to protect our kids so we could intervene in time so a lot of these things could be brought back so they don't come out in adulthood and become that catalyst to put them into that killer's category and all that. But, for recent studies, of course, again, this is the nature versus nurture aspect of the criminal development as we're getting older. The complex PTSD, early childhood trauma, a significant majority of studied offenders have histories of severe physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. That is huge. Things that you have to look out for, especially for teachers. You have a student, straight A's all the time. Let's just try and make it simple. Straight A's all the time, always clean cut and all that, always bathed in everything that you could think of. But as time goes, you start seeing their grades are starting to fall. They're a little more not kept up and all that. They stop bathing and all that. And you start noticing that difference, because a lot of times kids that are abused or abused by somebody else, these things start breaking down where they may not want to go to school, but if they're at school, they're wearing their emotions on their sleeves. They're actually crying out for help in that situation. Where the abuse is coming from is where you have to intervene. Kids that are sexually assaulted tend not to sometimes like shower. They feel disgusted with their body because of what somebody did to them. And those things show up. And it's one of the saddest things that you'll ever see. I've done a lot of work with children and trying to help in these certain situations when they're brought to my attention. PTSD, of course, any traumas from growing up. Some kids don't heal properly. They could have a parent die at a very young age and never really got specific help, because a lot of times that happens. If you have two parents and they're happily married and you're a kid and like say mom dies, sometimes the father's so distraught that they start to change. Of course, you're the young kid, you need that safety, and sometimes the safety goes away, and the father's so distraught that he never really gets the child that help. And then it kind of blows out of control. And that's another part of it. Those are the things we have to look out for. What's going on? We have to intervene sooner than later. We have to recognize these things, again, whether it's in our own children, especially they come home if they're being bullied or anything like that. We have to make sure that we are there for them and all that, get them the help. Even if we don't know how to get them the help, ask. If you're watching this show right now, we do have people part of Wardruna that could get you the people that you need to help in those situations with the development of your kids, to give them the best chance to have a normal, whatever normal is. Some of us aren't normal. I'm not normal. I'm a weirdo and I love it. But, those are the things we have to look out for with our kids. Very important. So there's the dissociative disorders that a lot of people use for a defense mechanism. They detach from the violent acts they commit. They always go back. So they dissociated so much they didn't even know they murdered somebody. That's been prevalent too in certain situations, especially when it comes down to, dissociative, like we talked about with the schizoid affective, the schizophrenia, of course, major part of it. That's a big thing. But again, we talked about earlier on with the psychopaths is that neurophysiological damage. Studies of brain scans, specifically the prefrontal cortex, amygdala, they often, we want to look for impairments in impulse control and emotional processing. That's a big thing, especially as a kid. Kids fall off. They're playing. They fall out of trees, trying to climb the tree. If they still do that nowadays, they're on their phones a lot now. Fall off their bike. Maybe the helmet wasn't on right, or if they're not wearing a helmet, trying to be Evel Knievel like we used to when we were younger. And, we get those head injuries. Back then, we just walk it right off. Some of these kids, they'll just walk it right off. They don't know. Also, we have to be careful with a lot of our young kids playing football or hockey or anything where there's a high velocity of impact and all. And we have to look at that. They should be getting those scans, especially when they're involved in that type of sport, or even if they fall down, don't let it go. You want to make sure that a lot of that stuff's, intact, and what we have to do to possibly treat it. So that's a big one. And then, again, going into the kids, the other things to look out for, just the neighborhood. If there's a kid out there hurting animals or just setting stuff on fire and think it's fun, those are big things. Also, some of our kids, especially if they go through sexual abuse or any kind of abuse, or there's just some kind of part in the brain that they start wetting the bed up to a later age than normal. Those are things we have to look at. What is it? Is it a psychological thing? What's going on there? We have to look at it. They do call that the McDonald triad, which, was back in '63. The psychiatrist Jan McDonald came up with this way of looking at things. It is debated in our field as modern forensic psychology. The historical triad of childhood, the red flags, is still a frequent point of study. We still look at all that stuff because a lot of times, a lot of the serial killers that were interviewed by Ressler and Douglas and Dr. Burgess back then, and when they had this, because it's in the 70s, this was 63, that they did look for these signs and ask when they were in childhood. A lot of them, almost 40 to 43% that were interviewed had these things going on. So is there a fact there, not a fact there? I don't know, but there is a lot that goes into that, and knowing these things and maybe trying to nip them in the butt sooner than later. Some of the stuff, again, could come out later on in life. The time is there. And again, there's catalysts. Some people, schizophrenia hasn't come out yet, but there's been signs that people that smoke marijuana heavily, I'm not saying that just because you smoke marijuana, you're going to be schizophrenic, but if some people have that in their DNA or their family line, a lot of times that is exacerbated by, smoking marijuana, other drugs brings it about. Again, the sociopaths, things are going to be heightened with drug use and all that, other things that we have to look out for and what's going on, things to check our neighbors, check our family, check our loved ones, seeing these things going on. And again, I encourage you guys all to look at some of these serial killers and their histories and all that, just what we talked about the last 3 episodes, and see what you could pull out of it. Maybe do your own diagnosis, see what they have a majority of, their underlying diagnoses and all that. Look into this even further, because we're really going to go down the rabbit hole with all this and, go further. And I think next week we're planning another episode. I haven't figured out exactly which direction I want to go with you guys, but maybe that'll be determined by some of the questions that you ask. Let's bring Gwen back up, and let's see if we have any questions from the Peanut Gallery, and see if we could. Hey, how you doing?
All right, listening to you, learning stuff.
Well, it's hard. This is a hard one because, personality disorders may not be all that exciting, but the whole part is when you look at that, you watch the episode back, hopefully, all you watch it as many times as you can, pause it, rewind, hear some of these parts. And again, it's fun to try and determine what serial killer has what and what they might be part of and parts of that and all that. I've always found that exciting, but then again, this was my profession for a while, so I guess I should be excited about it if it was. But again, some of this stuff keeps you safe. It keeps you safe knowing, but it also keeps you safe when if you meet somebody, now that you know all this stuff, it might be a red flag. It may not be a relationship you want to go forward with.
Exactly.
Just anybody in general, those are the things to look out for. And again, some people can have this stuff, it's treatable. I don't want to leave people all lonely. Some people go through some of this stuff, but do get the help. Again, like I told you, another part of life is let things eat you alive or you overcome them. And those are the things that's provided for us as the human race. So those are things we have to look at too.
Exactly.
So did we get any questions? Got your glasses on.
Yeah, have to read. I'm sorry, I can't. Some days are worse than others, but here we go.
Yep.
Let's see. I think the first one was, here we go. We'll pop it up. Has there been any serial killers with really high IQs?
Yeah, there has been. A majority of the time, a lot of the serial killers, when tested with tests like we're talking about today, that is another big thing that they test them with is their IQ of, testing the IQ. The average of a serial killer is 90 or less, which is really 90 to 93 is like average. So the intelligence, but people like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, they scored very high. Of course, there's so many different ones I can think of off the top of my head, but those are two of them. Actually, Dahmer had one of the highest. I think his IQ was up in 139 or something like that.
I was thinking it was Dahmer.
Yeah, Dahmer had, I think, the highest. The other ones, the co-ed killer there, his was up there pretty high. He was actually, when they were testing him, he said, "This question doesn't fit me." And actually, as a youngster, was helping people, the psychologist, rewrite some of these tests.
Oh, wow.
But the problem was when they rewrote them, they never changed them. When he got older and the psychologist tried to test him at an older age, he's like, "I wrote this stuff." So, of course, he's going to be able to manipulate that. That's one of them. That's Ed Kemper. I was like, I'm getting old. I'm forgetting names and all that. So,
well, there's
Ed
a lot
Kemper.
there to remember.
Yeah, it's hard.
It is, and I'll tell you from me and Tom both. I was a medic, and Tom was. I'm not sure how long you were, but I know you were. So
yeah, that was my first job out of college. My first job out of college, as a medic in the city of, in Connecticut, in Hartford, which was high crime rate at the time. Really, that's really what kind of got me going in a different direction. I've always wanted to get into law enforcement. It was just at the time when I came out of college, I had the degree in athletic training was one of my three and all that. And that was, I had to take a EMT class for that major. So you get through that. And then you come out and it's like, well, I can't seem to find a job. Let me try and get a job on an ambulance. And I did. I did that for quite a while. And then I started working in the ER as a nurse assistant. Where I did that.
I worked in the ER before, so.
And then and part of the ER, one of my jobs was to sit with people that were going through psychological problems to make sure they didn't try and off themselves while they're in the room until they could get proper help. And really, all these things that I did in my life, like you did, Gwen, my education, putting it into practice, working in the field with all those little things together, transformed in why I'm able to do what I do, how I pull off profiling people. Again, we talked about before, being a shaman. I always have that intersection of, am I picking this up from my spirit guides, or is this my training? Or sometimes, is this my trauma reacting to something I'm recognizing? as I got up. That's the whole part of your life. You're good at certain jobs because of your life experience.
Yes.
All right.
I agree.
I don't profile like everybody else. My profiling is a look at what I know up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always learning. You're always going to learn. And I'm hopefully the people that are watching are learning to a point where for them, they might still be in the field. It might help them a little bit more to look at things a little differently. Or some people are just interested in true crime and how it works and what's going on and the reality of it and how they could look at, somebody from history and how to break it down.
Oh, yeah, I do have a couple more questions. Somebody actually texted me a question instead of putting it on here. Do you mind if I read that for you?
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, it says, how do you handle borderline personality disorder with a family member or any of the disorders?
That's very hard. A lot of times it's not condemning them.
Right.
You have to show love. A lot of times when we look at it this way, when a lot of negativity is coming at you, the only way to battle is with positivity.
Yep.
Make sure that you're there for them, advocate for them. Some of them can't always advocate. You have to be there. But again, it's understanding. It's understanding it's a mental disorder and encouraging them to get the help, trying to take away the stigmas, because some people, they don't want to get help because I don't want to be deemed this, I don't want to be deemed that. But
especially back years ago. And it's more, you can get better help these days and not be criticized so much and all. But yeah, I went through. Tom and I tell you, we're similar. Like I said, I worked in the ER, I worked in pediatrics, I worked in the mental health unit at times, and on the road, and you would see and you would recognize. But I've learned a lot since then from Tom also. And there's one night we'll get on and talk about it, but there's an incident that Tom really helped me with, and he remembers this. So that was awesome.
we're gonna do that. We're gonna get a lot of people on. I know we haven't really, just you and I have been talking, and Sean from last week, but a lot of it is we're gonna get guests on that are really in tune to a certain part or a certain serial killer. We're really gonna break it down. It's good to have, again, it's a different life experience. It's a different perspective. Am I 100% right about all this stuff? No. Again, I've told about the paranormal. I've been 40 years and just all this stuff. Am I 100% right about it? No, nobody is. It's the chase. It's the helping people. From day one, from what I've done, if I could help a client or help somebody get closure, that's all it's all about.
It is.
Yeah. And that's the part to look at. Even with the question that was asked, you got to be there for people. You got to be there for your friends. You got to be more understanding. Yeah, you got to be understanding. But again, like we talk about on the show, if you recognize it, you have to realize what it is. A lot of times it's just people don't understand. People get bullied. They get pushed, over the cliff because people don't understand. And when they don't understand stuff, there's hate, there's animosity, and that's what triggers a lot of the stuff where they become that catalyst to start killing people. Even one of our own family members, you don't want that to happen. You don't want to see your family member end up like a Ted Bundy or anything like that. So it's a matter of seeing it. It's even to the point where you look at it when people are going at the end of life, they have, the brain disorders and all that. So they're starting to wear away and, they start acting out because their brain starts to deteriorate as they get older or going through those, types of things. They start telling us stuff. You just have to go with it. If they think they see something, you have to be there and you have to give them safety, give them love, make sure they're safe. It's the same thing with our kids. You can't be a perfect parent. There's no such thing.
Certain points you have to let them go do them.
Yeah, again, everybody has different life experience, even our own kids. You could overparent, underparent, of course. Is there the middle ground? The middle ground is the best that you could do. And all I could really tell people is when our kids are getting older, we have to be aware. We have to love them, of course. We have to let them do their thing. But we have to be there to guide them and make sure they're safe. That's all the important things, and the rest of the stuff is just gravy that you get to experience with with your kids and all that. But that's all we want to do. Love them, keep them safe, and just be aware of what's going on in their lives.
Now, Greg says you are a wealth of information. Info, Tom. You are, Tom. And we do have one more question. And if anybody
Sure.
has one, go ahead and type it out to us, please. But this one is, let's see, I don't know if you can see it. I know you're doing the
I'm blind. That's why you got your glasses on.
got my glasses. That's right. Has there
Yeah.
ever been a case that they were diagnosed with a mental issue and committed a murder and found out later maybe reaction to prescription meds from a doctor? Oh, interesting. That's a good
That
question.
is a good question. And if I knew that, I would answer it directly. But, is there a reaction or misdiagnosis? Potentially. Potentially, there is, they always warn you when you take medication that it could do this,
Yes.
this and that. So for that, where they had a mental disorder where they were fine, and did that medication become the catalyst to push them over the edge? Yeah, some medication can make you suicidal. Can it make you
Yes.
homicidal too? Yeah, potentially. So do I know of any? No, I'm actually going to look into it for you. And on the next episode at the beginning of the show, I'll see if I can answer that and see if there is a case that involves somebody pushing over the edge because of being over medicated, or maybe, a wrong medication that reacted to them to
Right.
become more homicidal. So it may not be a serial killer per se. It may just have been somebody that all of a sudden did a spree killing or something like that. But we could check that out. So that's a fantastic question.
All right, guys, we are about to end. So do you have
Yeah.
any more questions? Christy, you usually have some questions. Do you have any?
Yeah.
I know it's hard to think of them on the spot. It really is.
It is, and it is. And I want people to know, I know a lot of the information I'm giving, sometimes it could be intimidating and all that. Gwen knows I'm not an intimidating person, Some people
He's a
say
big,
I am.
he's a
I
big
don't know
teddy
why.
bear, actually. So.
Yeah, I like to joke around. Back in the old days when I did this stuff, yeah, I could be intimidating, but you had to
Oh,
be.
yeah.
That was
Had to
part of the
be.
job. I left that back in 2007. So, I've softened over the years. So just ask my better half. So she knows I've softened actually over the last year on top of it.
You
But,
really have. But
yeah.
I've got to see Tom and Stacia. I'm gonna go ahead and say her name because I know she's there. But yep, Carol says, hey. Hey there, honey. How are you? But yeah, I've seen Tom soften sort of
Yeah.
and get happier, and it's a good thing to see. It's a really good thing
Yeah.
to see. Now I have a question for you. Of everybody you've profiled that you remember and studied and all that. Let's see, which one, if you could meet one and in person and sit down and chat with them safely, which one would you like to go and pick their brain?
Well, that's the thing with me intellectually. I want to be challenged.
Yeah.
Most of us want to be challenged. When we meet somebody, we want to be challenged. And to tell you the truth, I love to sit with Ed Kemper because he was one of those guys that just challenged people. He had fun with it. He would mess with people. He would mind the language, but he would mind fuck people. And I really love that because I like that challenge. It's a game of chess with the mind. And I've always appreciated that over the years. That's one thing that being observant and being quiet and watching the room and how people react, how you will converse with somebody. And again, people, I'm not that intimidating. And the other disclosure is I am not profiling all my friends all at the same time. I'm not.
Lord, don't profile me, Tom.
So don't be afraid to talk to me at some of these events. I'm not profiling you to figure out all your wrongdoings or anything like that. No, just don't piss me off. That's all. So if you piss me off, then I might look into it a little further to see what makes you tick. But as long as you're gracious and nice, just like I'll be gracious and nice and to you, I'm always very giving. I will always give you information if you ask and all that, and we always have fun with it. So, but I'm not profiling everybody all the time.
No, it's not. Well, I don't think we have any more questions tonight. That's okay. Yeah. You can ask them next time. If you think of one, write it down. Yeah. Tom will be back every Thursday unless something unfortunate happens. I do want to bring up, we always a little chit chat before and after. Don't forget, I don't have the commercial for it yet. It's
There you
coming,
go.
but there we go. Tom, tell him.
We're working on that. Connecticut Paracon, July 11th. That is Charles,
Yeah.
myself, Sherman, and the Showman. That's our first big event that we're running. Again, Stacia and I, Wardruna, a lot of people with Wardruna, especially like somebody like Gwen, a lot of our other people that are involved with Wardruna. We're going to be
Yep.
speaking all over the country, even places that Stacia and I can't be. There's going to be other representatives from Wardruna speaking at other events. So you'll get a chance to hear all about the Healing Network. Again, with what I used to do, especially, with kids going through trauma, being a spiritual life coach with Wardruna and being able to help families with that and pointing out the right people for them to get that
Yes.
help that they need. That's something that, if you come to these events, you have questions, we're there for you to give you the right people to get the right help or whatever we could do for you. That's what we're there for. And that's what makes a show like Profiled very important too. We're looking at human nature and how to keep ourselves safe and our family, our loved ones, our village, our tribe safe. That's what we want to do.
Exactly right. And Tom's
Mhm.
part of my tribe. And so is Sean and
Exactly.
Greg and all those, even though we don't see each other every day. That's okay. All right. So have you got a title for next week? Do we have one yet?
I don't have a title next week. I'm kind of struggling with that one. I'm really thinking that, we're going to get out of the mind. We're going to get into the field next week. And really what we're going to do is the actual way that we move through a crime scene and how we look at evidence, how we bag evidence, how we look at things to put a profile together with the evidence and how the scene was left. So I really think we're probably going to do that. But unless something changes, I think I'll have that decided by this weekend and
All right.
we'll have something up and running. So I know Gwen wants to get her advertisement done for next week, and me
You
too.
know it.
Me too. I did this for a career, but I still have to study up. I still have to write my notes like I'm a teacher.
He
Because
does.
again, I'm getting old. I can't remember it like I used to, but I do read the notes, but then I get into some of the stories too, which more and more stories are going to start coming out. Again, once we get into the guests coming on, which will be fun, but also looking at some of these serial killers, and we're going to break them down like one by one, like people like Bundy and Gacy and Dahmer and what made them tick and all these things you're learning. We'll be immersed in those and you'll see, oh, that's why they thought this way. And it'll make a little bit more sense. It'll make it even more fun when you watch some of the movies on TV and all that, and how some of these people like myself that get called in to take a look at, okay, how are we setting up the movie? What do you think we should do to make it more realistic? So those are the good things that I like to do to help people out, make their movies more realistic and how a profiler would look at something. And that way the movies are realistic to life. And that's why you have a lot of the movie characters are based off of serial killers in real life. So that's where we get that. And we'll go into an episode of that too.
Well, we're a little bit over an hour, and I'm going to go ahead and say goodnight, and I'm going to get Tom to do his thing. Guys, next week.
I'm saying goodnight too. We'll all cut out. And, like I always like to say, we're at the end. So guess what, folks? Do your studying and all that. Look back at all these episodes and make sure you go down the rabbit hole again.